All right, if we can have everybody turn on their cameras so that we can do a conflict check. Judge, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? My name is Brian Lampert. I'm being the presiding judge today. We have a hard stop, and we've been instructed that we have to stop at 4 o'clock. So some of this preliminary material I'm going to try to go through rather quickly, and I'll ask everybody to be cogent, distinct, and to the point, because we will stop at 4 o'clock. So are each team ready to proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
These preliminary items, I'm sure you've heard them all before, so I'm going to go through them very quickly to save time. Have the sides provided the judges' scoring sheets? I need a response.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand video recorders are being used and we're taping this matter? Yes?
Yes, Your Honor.
The Colorado Bar Association will be taking photographs of the competition. You understand that?
Yes,
Is there anyone
Yes,
in the gallery who is connected with the teams, not competing in the round? I would ask them to leave the courtroom at this time. No recesses will be allowed. I ask the scoring panelists if they have any reasons to be biased for either team, one way or the other.
No
Honor.
conflicts.
Any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. You must be adhere to the time requirements, and the scoring judges will consider that in grading your performance. I'd like to confirm that no coach or team member other than the timekeeper is seated in the jury box. I'll take that as a.
I can confirm that, yes.
Could you each side introduce their participating team members, starting with the plaintiff?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. May the plaintiff's attorneys now introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Kyan Carney, and I will be doing the direct examination of Dakota Weirs, the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs, as well as doing the plaintiff's closing argument today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sophie Liebman, and I will be performing the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, as well as the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Hannah Moskowitz, and today I will be providing the direct examination of Carson Durst, the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams, and the opening statement for the plaintiff. At this time, may our witnesses please introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Maggie Holland, and today I am Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Matthias Bauer, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Tony Adams, and today I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Thank you. Now for the defense.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Lily Radowski, and today I'll be delivering the opening statement on behalf of the defense, as well as conducting the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Carson Durst.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Jordan Ryan, and today I'll be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Devin Williams and the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Charlotte Combe, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Skylar Weirs, as well as a cross-examination of Dr. Casey Rogers. I will also be delivering closing arguments on behalf of the defense. At this point in time, may our witnesses and timekeeper please introduce themselves?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Olivia Longi, and today I am Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Harriet Falconetti, and today I am Skylar Weirs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Milo Lamas, and today I am Dr. Devin Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Now, does anybody, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
My apologies. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Magdalena Bratic, and I'll be keeping time for the defense.
Is there anybody that knows anybody that would create a conflict? If not, we'll proceed. Okay. Plaintiffs, are you ready to commence your case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed. And I once again, I advise everybody that there's going to be some tight time limits, and let's be cogent to the point. Please proceed.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff does have some pretrial matters.
Please present them.
First, we ask that all witnesses be constructively sequestered.
Granted.
Your Honor, I believe under tournament rules, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses is not allowed.
Okay, I did notice. Go ahead, response.
Sorry, I do believe that sequestration is not allowed, but since it is just constructive, I do believe that that is allowed under the mock trial rules.
I'm going to rule that that's not allowed based on the package of materials I have.
Next, the plaintiff also asks that we be allowed to screen share exhibits and have them be constructively blocked from the jury until entered into evidence.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, barring tournament rule 7.4, we agree.
Then that is granted. Go ahead.
And we also ask that once exhibits are entered, that they be considered constructively shared and published to the jury.
Response, any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
That motion is granted.
Finally, we ask to reserve time in closing for rebuttal.
Absolutely, that is procedure. Any motions from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few. Firstly, we ask that if at any time the court cannot see or hear a witness testifying or a lawyer presenting, the court intervene immediately and that time be stopped until the issue is resolved.
Yeah, that seems fair. Any response?
We're okay with that, Your Honor.
Granted.
And pursuant to tournament rule 7.4, we also ask that Zoom annotation features be used during the admittance of exhibits for the purposes of witnesses in testifying.
Plaintiff, any response?
No, Your Honor.
That'll be granted then. No objections.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense has no further preliminary matters and is ready to proceed.
Well, with that consideration, let's proceed to trial. Opening statements from the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
All right. May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Hannah Moskowitz, and along with my co-counsel, Kyan Carney and Sophie Lehman, we are here today representing Dakota Weirs, a young man whose life has turned upside down because of Lush fertilizer. Imagine a hot summer afternoon, a hardworking teenager on his hands and knees, lining the pots of gardens day after day. Inside of office buildings, outside of corporate offices, Dakota Weirs consistently used a product known as Drufo, a chemical agent with no warning label despite being banned in the EU. Now, after repeated use of this chemical Drufo, Dakota developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a detrimental cancer that has destroyed his life. When Dakota was just 14 years old, he began working for a landscaping company, Haven Landscaping, a locally owned business that frequently used the products of Lush fertilizer. But what Dakota didn't know is that while he lined the pots, Lush lined their pockets. As a teenager, Dakota thrived off of helping others. He was an active member of his community, serving in his National Honor Society, leading his student government, and even helping out at the local homeless shelters when he could. Dakota was also a profoundly talented pianist, even receiving a scholarship to Juilliard, one of the most prestigious and academically qualified schools for aspiring musicians. But all of this was stripped from Dakota due to Lush Fertilizer's negligence. Today, we, the plaintiff, will prove by a preponderance of the evidence that it is because of Lush Fertilizer's neglect that Dakota Weirs developed this detrimental cancer. What this means is we will prove that it is more likely than not that it was a result of Lush Fertilizer's neglect that Dakota Weirs developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, Dakota is here today to discuss how after lining the pots, he developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Take great care to listen to the tragedy of Dakota, how he lost everything because of Lush Fertilizer's neglect, because Lush chose to line their pockets and protect the people who lined the pots. But Dakota's claims alone will not be the only evidence here today. We will also bring Carson Durst to the stand, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer. Now, Ms. Durst is a woman who dedicated her career at Lush Fertilizer to the understanding of Drufo as part of the product and development engineering team. Ms. Durst will be able to explain how they performed in-house studies that determined the potential carcinogenic effect of Drufo. Ms. Durst will also explain how there was one key conclusion within these studies. Baking Drufo could eliminate any carcinogenicity within the product, but company heads ignored this, instead thinking that lining their pockets was more important. Now, the witnesses will also be backed up by Dr. Casey Rogers, an unbiased doctor in agriculture who will be able to testify to the carcinogenic nature of Drufo. But this fight for justice is being undermined by the defense. Too preoccupied with corporate greed, the members associated with Lush Fertilizer have failed to see the irreparable damage they've caused to a bright young man whose future of humanitarianism, joy, and music has been unrightfully stripped from him. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as plaintiff, we must prove that it is more likely than not that Dakota developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as a result of Lush Fertilizer's neglect. Remember the biases and the motives of the defense, and take great care to listen to the tragedy of Dakota's life. Take great care to listen to everything that he lost as a result of Lush Fertilizer's neglect. We are honored to be representing to Dakota and hope to bring him justice for everything that he's lost in his young life due to cancer. Now, at the end of this trial, my co-counsel Kyan Carney will ask you to find in favor of the plaintiff. We thank you for listening to Dakota's story, and we hope you are as moved by his tragedy as we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Defense, would you like to proceed with your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Someone to blame. The plaintiff just told you a story of a tragedy, a story of a company that lined their pockets. They told you that this villain was Lush Fertilizer. But today I'm going to introduce you to Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush. Ms. Doncourt has dedicated her entire life to protecting the environment and creating a fertilizer that was safe for people to use. There is no villain in today's story. Just a desperate family looking for someone to blame. In order to understand what's happening today, we need to go back to the beginning, when Lush Fertilizer was first created. It's early 2000. Blake Doncourt sees the amount of damage that fertilizer is doing to the environment and decides to do something about it. She creates her own alternative, a better one that is safer. Before putting her product on the market, her research team conducts study after study after study to make sure that her fertilizer is safe. You'll hear that it was. Several years later, Dakota Weirs begins working at Havens Landscaping. Now you're going to hear that Havens used Lush fertilizer, but also that they used multiple other ones. Mr. Weir's job was to spread the fertilizer, to work with chemicals day in and day out. But Havens Landscaping never told Dakota what these chemicals were, how many he was using, or what were in any of these chemicals that he used every single day. Dakota Weirs was 14 years old. His bosses at Haven sent a 14-year-old boy out every single day to work with chemicals. They told him that he needed to wear a mask, that he needed to wear protective clothing, that he needed to protect himself. But they never followed through, so you'll hear that he didn't. Several years later, Mr. Weirs is diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. His family is devastated. They scramble to find a reason, any reason, why Dakota is so sick. They're desperate to find someone, anyone, to blame. They find a study. This study was done by Dr. Casey Rogers. This study said that Lush fertilizer could cause cancer. Never mind, the study was never published. Never mind, the study was never peer-reviewed. Never mind that the data collection methods were flawed. They had found someone to blame. Today, the plaintiff is suing Lush Fertilizer for negligence. The burden of proof is on them. That means that it is their job to prove to you, by a preponderance of the evidence, that Lush Fertilizer knew or should have known that their product could cause cancer, and that it was Lush and not something else that caused Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma. They will not be able to prove this to you today. Today, we, the defense, are going to ask you to keep in mind 3 questions throughout today's trial. 1, can you trust Casey Rogers' study? 2, was it something else other than Lush that caused Mr. Weir's cancer? And 3, did Dakota Weirs protect himself? At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Charlotte Combe, will stand before you and ask you these same questions. She will ask you for a verdict of not liable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Plaintiffs, are you prepared to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we call Dakota Weirs to the stand.
Thank you. Go ahead, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. Can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Yes, Dakota Weirs, Weirs.
To start, please introduce yourself to the court and jury.
My name's Dakota Weirs. I'm 20 years old, and I'm someone who loved being outdoors, helping my community, helping my school, and I loved playing the piano.
You said you love engaging in your community. What do you do for your community?
Well, in the little free time I had, I would do anything to just help. I used to help at this homeless shelter, or I would help the less fortunate members of my community. I would wash dishes. I would help them and just hang out with them. It was just something that I loved to do. Now I can't do any of that.
You also said you were an active member in your school. What did you do?
I was an active member in this prestigious academic club called National Honor Society for very well-talented academic students. I was also the president of our students' body government. You know, anything just to experience school and enjoy it was so awesome to me.
And lastly, along with your previously mentioned hobbies, you stated that you love to play the piano. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, the piano was a big part of who I was. Remember when I was younger, just underneath my grandpa's grand piano, just playing with toys. It was just awesome. I remember after my grandfather died, I began to hammer on the keys and just enjoy the piano even more. I began to perform at recitals. I won competitions, studied theory. I even got so good, I got awarded with an absolutely prestigious scholarship to a music school in New York, Juilliard. But now it's all been taken from me.
And moving on from this line of questioning, why are you here today?
Well, I've been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And although I'm not an expert with cancer, I'm here because I'm suing due to my work experience and believe that Lush fertilizer has caused my cancer.
Now, when did you start working?
Started working at age 14.
And who did you work for?
I worked for Haven Landscaping, a small, locally owned business.
And why did you work?
I just loved being outdoors, working with my hands, feeling the wind on my face. And I needed some money too, so it just seemed like a perfect fit.
At work, where specifically did you work?
Honestly, all over. I worked in resorts, soccer fields, neighborhoods, golf courses, houses of worships, and malls, just anywhere that they put me to work.
And what was your main role at Haven Landscape Company?
Well, I was kind of young. I was 14, so I didn't work with any of the big machinery. Instead, I just worked with applying fertilizers and other chemicals.
And to be more precise, can you explain exactly what you did with these fertilizers?
Well, yeah, it was a super simple task. Let's say you have a pot right here. I would grab the spray fertilizers and spray them around the pot, just move them around. It was super easy and simple to do.
What did you wear when you would work?
Well, it was during the summer, so like any normal person, I would just wear shorts and a t-shirt. It was too hot and the wind felt great on my face, so I also didn't wear a mask. Me and everybody else, we just wore shorts and a t-shirt.
Now, what happened just before you were about to leave for Juilliard?
I began to feel horrible. I had rapid weight loss. My abdomen would swell up to double its size. I felt fatigued, enlarged lymph nodes. I just felt awful. I started going to the hospital. I wanted to see what was wrong with me. And I just accumulated massive hospital debts. Nobody knew what was wrong with me.
But after those many doctor's visits, what was the final conclusion?
The final conclusion was that I had non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Now, how did you hear about the drug Drufo?
Well, now that I couldn't do anything, couldn't play the piano, couldn't help my community, I was at home doing the only things that I could do, watch the TV. And the story came up that Lush fertilizer knew that Drufo ingredient in it.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay because it's not being offered for the truth of the matter assertive, but rather this is being offered for the effect on the listener.
A response, Your Honor.
Pardon?
A response, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Your Honor, if the opposing counsel is using it merely for the effect on the listener, in that case, I would change my objection to more prejudicial than probative.
I'm going to uphold the objection based on hearsay. Please proceed.
Your Honor, may my co-counsel screen share what has been marked for identification purposes as evidence 1?
Yes, please.
Can you see this, Mr. Weirs?
Yes, I can.
I'm showing you what has been marked as exhibit 1. Do you recognize it?
Yeah, I do.
What is it?
Well, this is the packaging label on the back of Lush fertilizer products.
And how are you familiar with it?
Well, after I heard that Lush fertilizer could cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, we looked into it, and this is a picture of the packaging that my manager at Haven Landscaping sent me.
Does this document fairly and accurately represent the Lush fertilizer packaging that you found?
Yes, absolutely.
Your Honor, at this time, I offer exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection to exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1 is deemed admitted.
Now, Mr. Weirs, why did this piece of news stand out to you?
In the whole entire packaging, there's not a single warning of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or other health causes that these products could pose. It's absurd.
And after seeing this label, did you or you and your father do any other research regarding this product?
Absolutely. We started looking into Lush fertilizer, and it turns out that Lush fertilizer is sold all over the world.
Did you find anything specifically in your research?
Yeah, well, we found a French packaging label of Lush fertilizer.
Your Honor, may my co-counsel screen share what has been marked for identification purposes as evidence number 2?
Any objections from the defense?
Not to the screen sharing, Your Honor.
Okay, you may publish that exhibit.
Mr. Weirs, can you see this?
Yes, I can.
I'm showing you what has been marked as exhibit number 2. Do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
Well, this is just the translated version from the French lush fertilizer packaging into the English words.
And how are you familiar with it?
Well, after my dad and I were looking into the company, my dad actually speaks fluent French. So when we came across this this packaging label, we tossed it into Google Translate, and this is the exact copy of it.
Does this document fairly and accurately represent the French lush packaging that you and your father have found?
Yes, this is exactly how we found it.
Your Honor, at this time I enter exhibit 2, into evidence.
You requested it be entered?
Yes.
Response from the defense?
Your Honor, I object as to hearsay within hearsay.
Any other objection?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
This is not hearsay because it's a statement made by the party opponent.
In response to that, Your Honor?
If that's your basis, I'd ask you to lay a little bit additional foundation from your witness.
Regarding the exhibit number 2?
Yes, as to whether it's connection to the defendant's corporation.
May I have time to confer with my co-counsel?
I'm sorry, you were garbled on your transmission. Go ahead, say again. I couldn't hear you.
May I have time to confer with my co-counsel?
Yes, you may.
I will play that.
Yes, you may.
Oh, thank you. May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Mr. Weirs, can you please repeat what this is, or evidence number 2, exhibit number 2?
Yes, this is the back of lush fertilizer packaging from France.
And who created this product?
Well, it's French lush fertilizer packaging, but my dad and I translated it over to English.
And who wrote this label?
Lush fertilizer.
Your Honor, at this time, I enter what has been marked as exhibit number 2 into evidence.
Any response to the additional foundation?
Your Honor, this is still hearsay within, there is still a level of hearsay that opposing counsel has not given a response to. I understand that one level of hearsay may be qualified under a statement of party opponent. However, there's a second level of hearsay that exists within this document because this document, as this witness previously testified, was put through Google Translate. That's a second level of hearsay.
Your Honor, I have a response to that.
I'm going to stop you here. I'm going to allow the exhibit in based on the additional foundation. Please proceed.
Mr. Weirs, what did you notice about this label's ingredients?
Well, if you look closely, there's not a single mention of an ingredient of Darufo.
And moving on, who is Skylar Weirs?
This is my fraternal twin.
And what happened between you and Skylar?
I mean, things honestly just kind of took a turn for the worse. As my medical bills started piling up, my parents started aiding me with my medical bills instead of aiding her for her gambling debts.
Now, after this horrible diagnosis, what is your outlook for the future?
The one thing that I've learned is to really appreciate everything that you have. Life moves so fast and you can really lose it all. You need to enjoy every moment. You need to enjoy helping your community, participating in your school, and doing the things you love, because in a blink of an eye, it can all be gone.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, I'm so sorry to hear about your diagnosis. Unfortunately, I've got to ask you a few questions about it today. Mr. Weirs, it's your claim today that Drufo caused your non-Hodgkin lymphoma, isn't it?
That is correct.
To be clear, you're not a medical doctor.
No, I'm not.
You're not a scientist.
I am not.
You're not an expert on the science behind non-Hodgkin lymphoma, are you?
No, I am not.
You're not an expert on the science behind fertilizers either, isn't that true?
I'm not an expert on fertilizers, no.
Mr. Weirs, you used to work at Haven Landscaping, correct?
I did, yeah.
And your main job there was to spread seeds and fertilizers, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I was too old to work with machinery, so yeah.
Mr. Weirs, you worked with many different types of fertilizers, didn't you?
Primarily lush fertilizer products, but I worked with a variety.
That's a yes to my question.
Well, it's not as simple as just a yes or no answer. It's that I worked with many different, but lush fertilizer was the primary fertilizer that we worked with.
Mr. Weirs, you don't remember every single fertilizer you used while you worked at Haven's Landscaping, do you?
Well, no, I've used so many different fertilizers that no.
And because you've used so many different fertilizers, you also don't have a list of ingredients of those products, do you?
No, I don't write the packaging of every fertilizer that I use.
Mr. Weirs, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where you were using fertilizers. You said on direct that you often worked outside with them at soccer parks, correct?
Yeah.
You also sometimes you work to spread fertilizers indoors as well in office parks and malls, correct?
Well, there's some indoor buildings that I used to apply the fertilizers in, but primarily it was used outside in places such as soccer fields and golf courses.
Mr. Weirs, I'm not asking primarily where you used fertilizers, just that you did use them indoors, correct?
Yes, occasionally.
Mr. Weirs, you're aware that many fertilizer packagings have warning labels on them, aren't you?
Well, you know, I was 14 at the time, so it's not like I was reading every single fine print letter on the back of packaging. But yes, some fertilizers did have warnings, not lush fertilizer products.
Mr. Weirs, you've gotten just a little bit ahead of me. I'm just asking you're aware that there were warnings, that there were.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I'm just asking that there were warnings on fertilizer products, and there were.
Yes, yeah. Not lush fertilizer products, but yeah.
Mr. Weirs, you're aware that some of those warnings said not to use the fertilizer indoors. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Mr. Weirs, you sometimes used those products indoors, didn't you?
Occasionally I did, yes.
Mr. Weirs, you're also familiar with Exhibit 1, aren't you?
Yeah.
Ms. Bartich, if we could get Exhibit 1 up on the screen. Mr. Weirs, can you see that?
No, I cannot. There I can, yes.
If you want to look over to the right side of the Exhibit 1, under User Safety Recommendations, Exhibit 1 says, as with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers all exposed skin, doesn't it?
That's what it reads.
Mr. Weirs, you didn't wear long sleeves when you were working, did you?
Well, I didn't find need to, as I didn't know that lush fertilizer could cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Mr. Weirs, that wasn't my question. I'm just asking that you didn't wear long sleeves, and that's true.
Correct.
You didn't wear long pants.
There wasn't need to.
So you didn't wear long pants.
No, I did not. There wasn't need to.
Instead, you wore shorts and a t-shirt.
Well, if I'd known that lush fertilizer could cause potential health harms on me, I probably would have. But no, I did not.
Mr. Weirs, I'm not asking about what you were planning on doing if circumstances were different. I'm just asking what you actually did. And what you did was wear shorts and a t-shirt.
Correct.
If you could look back at Exhibit 1, it also says use of an N95 mask or respirator recommended, doesn't it?
That's what it states.
You didn't wear an N95 mask or a respirator, did you?
Well, no, I didn't know that Lush fertilizer could harm me, so I didn't find it necessary,
So that's a yes, you didn't wear those things.
as I just answered.
No, thank you, Ms. Bertich. No, Mr. Rears, you'd agree with me that you worked with other people at Haven Landscaping, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I had coworkers.
You'd agree with me that some of your coworkers also didn't wear that protective clothing.
Well, as they also didn't know that Lush fertilizer products could cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, none of us really found it necessary to wear those protective gear.
So others didn't wear protective gear, yes?
I can't speak on other people, but the majority of us didn't.
Mr. Rears, despite the fact that other people you worked with didn't wear protective clothing, you've never become aware of any of them getting non-Hodgkin lymphoma, have you?
I can't really speak on my other coworkers, as I do not stay in close contact with them, so that I do not know.
So you don't know, yes?
I don't know. I'm not in contact with my coworkers.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
Thank you very much. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. How old were you when you started working, Mr. Rears?
I was 14 at the time.
Mr. Rears, had you ever seen any warnings on these bags? Excuse me.
Lush fertilizer products, there is no warning that they can cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross?
None necessary, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weirs. Thank you for your testimony. Next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, oh, do you want to turn it? Sorry. Do you want, at this time, the plaintiff calls Ms. Carson Durst to the stand.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Durst. Would you please state your name and spell the last for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Carson Durst, spelled D-U-R-S-T.
Thank you. And would you please explain your educational background for the jury?
Of course. Well, I've always been really connected with the natural world, and it pushed me to a degree in chemical engineering from Arizona State University. And I graduated there and enjoyed sunny days and continuing to be outside. I wanted to continue this in my career as well.
And after those sunny days at ASU, where did the degree in chemical engineering lead you in your career?
Well, my degree led me to my role, where I'm currently the head of research and development team at Terra's Greenery, where I oversee the development of their line of top-notch fertilizers and lawn enhancement products.
Now, have you done this type of work before?
Yes, in fact, I have. I was hired right out of college by Lush Fertilizer after receiving a degree in my degree. Originally, I was hired as an intern, and then I was moved into the research and development team on a full-time promotion.
It's quite impressive. How did you find this job at Lush?
Well, I was really, really close with the Doncourt family, and after I'd grown up with their son, Charlie, Miss Blake Doncourt knew that I was extremely gifted in chemical engineering and saw all my hard
Your
work.
Honor, speculation.
Response.
Your Honor, the witness has testified to the close nature of her relationship between herself and Ms. Doncourt, meaning that she would be privy to the knowledge of Ms. Doncourt's feelings about her.
I'll allow it. Go ahead. Please proceed.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How did you find this job at Lush?
Oh yeah. Well, after growing up with the Doncourts, the Miss Blake Doncourt was the CEO, and she had seen my hard work and dedication to my studies. So she offered me a internship to hone in my skills.
And what was working at Lush like?
It was great for start because of my work ethic. I moved very quickly within the ranks of Lush Fertilizer and had gotten promoted to a full-time position.
And as you received that full-time position, what was your main focus?
Well, as I had been promoted, my skills became more focused on the development of the chemical drufa, which was my biggest assignment.
And on your assignment for Drufo, or what sort of things did you research?
Well, Drufo was a revolutionary fertilizer product, but it definitely had posed some concerns to the safety of the product. So we were researching its potential carcinogenic capabilities.
And did you find any studies that showed its potentially carcinogenic nature?
Yes, in fact, I found a study from England when I was on the research task development team that had concluded that their chemical compounds may be carcinogenic in rats.
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This was our foundational question. I was about to ask co-counsel to pull up the exhibit so that I may do the process necessary to enter the exhibit into evidence.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
The witness was stating the conclusions of the study. That can only be done once the study is already entered into evidence.
Well, I will allow the foundation questions. Proceed with the foundation and then offer the exhibit, and we'll rule at that time.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you did mention a study that you researched while, or that you found while researching Drufo. Do you remember the publisher of this study?
Yes, the research that I encountered was published by the European Foundation of Oncology and Environmental Sciences.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect co-counsel is screen sharing Exhibit 3. Now, Ms. Durst, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize it?
This was the exhibit that I had encountered, researched, and then published in my lab journal.
And would you say this is a fair and accurate representation of Exhibit 3?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to hearsay.
Which part of the hearsay objection are you raising?
This is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter.
Any response from plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, this is indeed an exception to hearsay under several exceptions. First, under 8038, it is a public record as it is a published study in England. Additionally, under 80318, learned periodicals are exceptions to hearsay.
Well, I find that this is an article that she used and pulled by her own efforts, and it was part of her journal. We're admitting it based on the part of her research. The exhibit is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Durst, what does the study in front of you reveal about the carcinogenic effects of Drufo?
The results of this study show that a compound does exhibit carcinogenic potential and increases the incidence of leukemia. Moreover, the conclusion states that the compound is especially dangerous in children.
Now, this study was tested on rats. Why can a conclusion about the carcinogenic nature to humans be based on a study on rats?
Well, rats are genetically very similar to humans.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper expert opinion.
Response?
Your Honor, within the witness's job as as a part of the product and development engineering team, they would have a basic understanding on why these two things may be equated.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
While the witness is able to testify based on her personal experience about Drufo and everything that she observed with it, she's not able to testify about the genetic similarities between rats and humans. That is expert testimony.
My ruling is that the witness may testify as to what is in the study, but not that she herself endorses or is qualified to make the statement. You may talk about what's in the study, but not your conclusions with regards to rats and cancer. But what does the study say? Please proceed.
Now, Ms. Durst, did other scientists within Lush Fertilizer find that this study was valid?
Yes, as it is immoral to test on humans, this study prompted further observation as by observational studies as to its potential carcinogenic properties.
And did scientists bring up these potential carcinogenic properties with company heads?
Yes, they did.
Your Honor, at this time, let the record reflect opposing counsel, or sorry, co-counsel is screen sharing Exhibit 4. Ms. Durst, are you able to see that?
Yes, I am.
And what is Exhibit 4?
This is an email that was sent to me as well as many other company heads regarding the second in-house study that we did after the initial research on the rat experiment in England.
And how do you know?
Because I had received this email.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of Exhibit 4?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to enter Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to hearsay.
Any response to the hearsay objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 8012, it is a statement by the party opponent and thus admissible in court as an exception to hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Please,
If I may make an offer of proof.
please go ahead.
We have another witness that will testify in just a few moments that this email did not actually exist and was not in fact sent by Lush Fertilizer. There's a genuine question about this email's authenticity, and as such, it should not be admitted and considered a statement of a party opponent under 801 D2.
Well, I'm going to leave that for cross-examination. I'm going to allow the exhibit to be admitted. Exhibit 4 is admitted.
Now, Mr. This email mentions a potential follow-up study. Was there another follow-up study conducted after this email was sent?
Yes, there was an in-house study that was conducted.
And what did this second study find?
There was research from other scientists that showed Drufo may not only be carcinogenic, but may be linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The reports recommended baking Drufo to eliminate all of these chances.
And to your knowledge, does baking Drufo completely eliminate the carcinogenic risk?
Completely.
So, to your knowledge, why didn't Lush take this precaution?
Lush was in some, based on my experience when I was working there in the company, Lush was in some financial trouble due to a contentious divorce going on between the CEO.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Could you lay a little more foundation as to how this witness has any knowledge of this event?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Durst, you mentioned earlier how you were quite familiar with the Doncourt family. Did this persist into your employment at Lush Fertilizer?
Yes, in fact, it did. During college, all of my winter and spring breaks I spent with the Doncourt family, and then we only grew closer from there after I became employed for the CEO's company.
So would you say that you were well aware of a lot of the personal aspects of Miss Doncourt's life in addition to her family's?
Oh yes, they were like family, not to mention that this was very prevalent in my work life within the company as a whole.
Now, to your knowledge, based on both your close relationship with the Doncourt family in addition to your employment at Lush Fertilizer, why didn't Lush take the precaution of baking Drufo?
Lush was in some deep financial trouble due to a contentious divorce between the CEO and their spouse. And from my perspective, the ultimate goal of Lush was to line their pockets.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
I'm gonna sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm just gonna sustain it based on the lack of foundation as to how the finances of the divorce affected the corporation. Please proceed.
Now, eventually, how did your employment at Lush continue?
Well, I had brought up my discontentment with the actions of failing to bake Drufo several times, but it resulted in me being fired. My interest just no longer aligned with Lush Fertilizer, and at first it was disappointing, but ultimately it was a great thing for me. Terrace Greenery is a company that I work for now and that I can be proud of the work that I'm doing.
Were there any issues with your newfound success at Terrace Greenery?
Unfortunately, I'd forgotten and missed the fine print of a non-compete agreement with Lush Fertilizer. All employees had signed this when they joined, and naturally they took me to court, but we quarterly came to an agreement, and I completely understand where they are coming from. Unfortunately, the fertilizer industry isn't the largest, so I just went to where my skills could be used at Terra's Greenery. They just so happened to be rivals.
But did you comply with all other agreements in your contract?
Yes, I simply forgot something that I signed 5 years ago. I mean, who wouldn't?
And despite all these, or with these discontentments that you previously had with Lush Fertilizer, what's your opinion on the company?
Well, I'm clearly against the negligence that they've shown in Trufo, based on my experience. What they're doing is horrible, but I am very grateful for my experience and the opportunity that they gave me to find a career that I'm passionate about, and I still have a deep love for.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Durst.
Good afternoon.
You used to work for Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Correct, for several years.
And you were fired for poor performance.
Again, my interests no longer aligned with the company, and so that disconnect did result in my firing.
Ms. Durst, that wasn't quite my question. All I asked is if you were fired for poor performance, and you were, weren't you?
Well, I was fired, yes, for a multiple amount of reasons. Poor performance had been leading up, but again, these complaints were brought up more because of my ideological differences with the company.
All right. Well, you considered Blake Doncourt to be a friend, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We were like family.
Exactly. You were like family.
Yes.
But Ms. Doncourt didn't stick up for you while you were being fired.
Well, Ms. Doncourt had an entire company to run and a contentious divorce to deal with.
But you were hurt by this, weren't you?
Oh, I was greatly disappointed by the organization of this company. But again, in the long run, I'm working for a company that I love.
Ms. Durst, that wasn't quite my question. I asked if you were hurt by Blake Doncourt not sticking up for you, and you were, weren't you?
I mean, again, at the time, yes, I was definitely hurt.
You felt betrayed.
I did. I had mentioned that I felt betrayed. Again, everything happens for a reason. And so I'm glad I'm here where I am now.
And you now work for Terra's Greenery, correct?
Yes, I do.
Terra's is Lush's biggest competitor.
Coincidentally, yes, they are huge rivals. But again, I don't know how many fertilizers that are common, fertilizer brands common in the United States market.
But Ms. Durst, you're working on a new product at Terra's, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Another revolutionary fertilizer. Grass is always getting greener.
Ms. Durst,
Exactly.
excuse me, Ms. Durst, I'd ask you to answer the questions that they asked. Any additional facts that you'd like to add can be done on redirect. If you can answer the question and not expound on your personal feelings about the question, go ahead. On cross-examination. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, you're now hoping that this product will overtake Lush's as the best-selling fertilizer on the market, correct?
Objection,
Yes,
Your Honor.
they are
Relevance.
competitive.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the objection. You both spoke at the same time. Go ahead.
Apologies. Relevance, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
Ms. Durst, you're hoping that your new product at Terra's will overtake Lush's as the best-selling fertilizer on the market.
The companies are competitive, yes.
So that was a yes to my question, Ms. Durst.
Yes.
Now going back to when you did work for Lush, you were hired on as an intern, correct?
Correct.
When you did your research in early 2003, you were an intern.
Correct.
And as an intern, you did not have access to what your project manager put into her data reports.
Not until I started working full-time, which happened quickly.
But even when you were promoted, you still didn't have access to all of the data.
No, I did not, just sufficient.
But you didn't have access to all of the data, Ms. Durst.
That is correct.
Your Honor, asked and answered.
You're correct. It has been asked and answered. Let's proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. No, there were multiple other members of the research and development team.
Correct? Was that a question? Yeah.
Yes. And you didn't have access to their analyses either.
I believe I just stated I did not have access to all of the data. I worked closely with my team, but that's not how a large company operates.
Exactly. So from the time you were hired at Lush to the time you left, you didn't have access to all of the results of the studies.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I'd like to answer the question. It's a slightly different question and it's rephrased. Go ahead and answer the question. Would you like it repeated?
Yes, please.
Please repeat the question and I'd like an answer.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Durst, from the time you were hired to the time you left Lush Fertilizer, you didn't have access to all of the results of the studies.
That is correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Durst, is it typical for every employee to have all of the information?
No, we would become overwhelmed with the information. Science does not operate on a single person. It is a team effort. And moreover, we communicated. I had several emails and correspondence with my teammates. Whether or not I have access to every single number on a spreadsheet was irrelevant to Lush's negligence.
So would you say that you had a sufficient amount of data?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Final recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Durst, thank you for your testimony. You're excused. Plaintiff, would you please proceed to call your next witness?
Your Honor, I apologize. Could we have just one moment? We're having a bit of a technical difficulty.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your patience. My apologies. We just had to switch computers. So I renamed myself. I'm Charlotte. This used to be Jordan's, just to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to proceed. Plaintiffs, what's your next witness?
The plaintiff now calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand. And before we begin, may I request a brief time check, please?
Can we get a time check?
Lovely. May I begin, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Dr. Rogers, why are you here today?
I'm here today to give my expert opinion on whether or not the chemical Drufo can cause cancer.
And where are you currently employed?
I work as a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, in the Horticulture and Entomology Department.
Let's discuss your qualifications. Could you please outline your educational background for the judge and jury?
Sure. So I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in Chemistry and Agriculture at Colorado State University. And from there, I went on to get my PhD in Agriculture and Entomology at the University of California, Berkeley, where I now work.
And what did you do before you got your PhD in Agriculture and Entomology?
Well, before getting my PhD, I worked as a research journalist for a large multinational chemical company.
In this job, what did you do?
It was primarily interpreting statistics and data provided by companies to help them make smart decisions.
Moving on, have you done any work or research specifically related to Drufo?
I have. For about 8 or 9 years now, I've been conducting studies on the chemical Drufo. It started primarily looking at the environmental effects of the chemical, and as time has gone on, I've looked more at the effects of the human body on the chemical.
Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been previously marked as Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 for the purpose of witness identification.
Any objection?
No objection to showing it constructively outside the eyes of the jury, Your Honor.
Okay. With that caveat, you may show those exhibits.
Dr. Casey Rogers, do you recognize these documents?
Yes. So Exhibit 6 is a copy of my CV, and Exhibit 7 is a list of some of my research publications.
How often do you update these?
I update this regularly whenever there's new information to put on there.
Are these fair and accurate representations of your experience in publications?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 7 into evidence.
Defense, you have an objection?
Yes, Your Honor, to cumulative.
Because of the time restraints of this court and our busy schedule here, trying to catch up on the cases that we've been delayed by COVID, I'm going to allow the use of the curriculum vitae in lieu of direct testimony as to foundation and qualifications of this witness. They're admitted.
Your Honor, under Rule 702, I move to enter Dr. Rogers as an expert in agriculture, horticulture, and chemistry.
Any objection or voir dire?
Yes, Your Honor, permission to conduct a voir dire.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
Just to clarify, you aren't a medical doctor, right?
No, I'm not, but the field I work in, looking at the effects of agricultural products, does largely overlap with different effects of the human body.
So just to clarify, because you're not a doctor, you've never been to medical school?
No, I have not been to medical school.
You have no formal training in the treatment of any type of disease?
As I said before, a lot of my experience working in agriculture and its effects has given me some level of experience with its effects on the human body.
But just to clarify, you have no formal training in the treatment of any type of disease?
I have a somewhat amount of training as it overlaps with agriculture, but not a degree of that specifically.
You have no formal training in the diagnosis of any type of disease?
No, I do not.
You have no experience diagnosing any individual with a disease?
No, I do not.
Meaning you have no experience or training diagnosing any individual with cancer?
As I've said before, cancer specifically actually overlaps quite a bit with my studies in agriculture. So I do have some experience with that disease in particular, but no formal degree or official training.
Dr. Rogers, I'd like you to listen to the question. Question is, did you have any experience diagnosing cancer? That was the question, and you can answer that question.
Yes, Your Honor. I have not.
Okay, please proceed with your voir dire.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense does not object to the tendering of Dr. Rogers as an expert in agriculture, chemistry, and toxicology. However, as long as it bars any testimony on medical opinions or diagnoses, given Dr. Rogers' expert report, we believe that they may try to provide opinions for the court today about Dakota Weirs and specifically what caused their diagnosis. So we ask that for a limiting instruction that it only include their specific biological scientific knowledge about the broad causes of a toxicant on the human body.
Response?
Your Honor, I believe that Dr. Casey Rogers is being entered as an expert in agriculture, horticulture, and chemistry. And in these fields, I will, in future questions, I will lay foundation for how his current projects overlap with how specifically fertilizers and other similar products have effects on the human body, but only that specific overlap. I ask that he be allowed to testify because I will lay foundation with one question.
Okay, with the understanding that Dr. Rogers will not be allowed to testify in the area of medicine, he's not a medical doctor. To the extent that you can lay foundation with regards to his opinions in other areas, I will allow it. Please proceed.
Dr. Casey Rogers, could you please elaborate on your current projects?
Sure. So I have currently just finished up working on a study relating to the potential link between the use of the chemical Drufo and development of cancer or other harmful diseases.
Under Rule 702, I move again to enter Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in agriculture, horticulture, and chemistry, and that he be allowed to testify specifically to this overlap, as he has done extensive research and has experience and knowledge.
Well, I'm going to allow him to testify as an expert on agricultural, horticulture, and chemistry. To the extent that there is any overlap, we'll need to lay the foundation. I'm not going to allow him to testify on a general area of overlap until I hear what the overlap is.
Sorry, Your Honor, if I may clarify.
Yes.
Specifically the overlap that he studied between this specific chemical, Drufo, and cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Again, when we get to that question, I'd like to hear the foundation as to what research and experience he has in that area. Then I will rule at that time. I'm not allowing him wholeheartedly to testify into, quote, an overlap area until I hear his qualifications in a specific area.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Casey Rogers, what specific relationship did you study in your professionally conducted study?
Well, in that study in particular, I looked at the relationship between the use of the chemical Drufo and development of cancers such as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
So how much experience with this topic did you gain?
Oh, I've spent a vast amount of time researching both the chemical Drufo for years and more recently, cancers such as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as part of this study.
Your Honor, I again move to enter Casey Rogers to allow him to testify on this specific overlap due to his experience from his study.
I'd ask you to ask the question and then I'll rule if there is an objection.
Yes, Your Honor, I will get to that question later if I may move on now.
Yes.
Why were you first prompted to study Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, when the chemical first came to market, I had concerns that it had been rushed. It just seemed like the company was more concerned about lining their pockets than the people who were lining the pots.
Objection, speculation.
Response?
I don't believe that the question called for speculation. It was simply asking him why he studied this specific link.
Well, I'm going to, no need at this point. I'm going to ask the doctor not to talk about lining their pockets without having the information available to him. It's the finances of the corporation. The term is prejudicial in itself, and I'll ask that that testimony be stricken. You may ask a question, but doctor, I'd ask you to keep to your area and not speculate with regards to the company's motives or financial aspects of it with regards to information you do not have available to you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please.
Dr. Rogers, what methodology did you use in your study of Drufo?
Well, in my study, I started off, as is very common in the scientific community, with a control group. So I looked at people who had never been exposed to the chemical Drufo. Then from there, I also looked at a group of people who were occasionally exposed to the chemical Drufo and people who were often exposed to the chemical on a daily basis, usually.
And what did you find in this study?
Well, the results were actually quite surprising. I found that people who often use the chemical were 10 times more likely to develop cancers such as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as compared to the control group who had never used it. And similarly, people who had sometimes used the product were 5 times more likely to develop cancers.
In your expert opinion, what did these results suggest?
Well, they certainly show a clear correlation between the use of the chemical Drufo and development of cancers. And with the correlation so strong, such as 10 times as much, a correlation that strong, causation becomes more probable than not.
In reviewing for this case, what records did you analyze?
I analyzed the medical and employment records of Mr. Weirs.
What objection as to hearsay?
Response?
I don't believe that the question I asked called for hearsay, but as I will be getting to a question that does call for hearsay, these medical records are an exception to hearsay under Rule 8034 as they are records used for medical diagnosis or treatment.
Is there any other area of the hearsay rule that you would like to offer?
Your Honor, I just asked that foundation be laid that those are the medical records specifically of Dakota Weirs. Yes, that's all I have for now, Your Honor.
Okay, so you're saying that they're records of another person, not his, therefore the exception doesn't apply?
Your Honor, I just asked that the foundation be laid that this is Dakota Weirs' medical records and they relate to his diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
If you can connect the records to his studies and an additional foundation, I will allow it.
Dr. Rogers, what information did these medical records contain?
The medical records contain the diagnosis of Mr. Weirs with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And what did you learn about non-Hodgkin lymphoma during your study?
Well, from my studies, I learned that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a type of cancer that affects the lymphatic system. One important thing to note about it is that the 5-year survival rate is 72%. And furthermore, although it can be controlled, it can never fully be cured, meaning that Mr. Weirs in today's trial will live with this disease for the rest.
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of the expert.
I'm going to allow it. This is epidemiological information he's personally found from his research and from other studies, and he can rely upon that. Please proceed.
Dr. Rogers, how does this study relate specifically to Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, Mr. Weirs in today's trial would have fallen in the often or almost daily use of the chemical. And so because of that, according to the study, that would have put him at a 10 times greater risk of developing cancer.
In your expert opinion, do you believe that prolonged exposure to Drufo caused Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
It is more probable than not.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper expert opinion, if I may be heard briefly.
Yes, please.
During my voir dire, it was established that Dr. Rogers has no experience whatsoever diagnosing any individual, any training or experience diagnosing any individual with any type of disease, much less cancer. Thus, their testimony today about what may or may not have caused Mr. Weirs to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma falls outside of their expert tendering.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that I have laid extensive foundation for how Dr. Rogers knows about non-Hodgkin lymphoma and specifically how Drufo could have potentially caused it based on his study and his extensive studies on how fertilizers and other chemicals impact the human body.
I'm going to allow the question and the answer. Cross-examination can bring out his lack of qualifications as a non-doctor. Please proceed.
No further questions, Your Honor.
So you're up. Cross-examination, please. You can start with that question.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon again, Dr. Rogers. So just to clarify, your study, it's a statistical analysis, right?
Yes, I'd say that's correct.
You touched on this during direct examination, but statistical analyses, they show correlation, right?
Yes, that is true. They show correlation. In this case, a very strong one.
But they don't show causation, right?
No, but as I stated in my direct testimony, as the correlation gets stronger, the probability for causation also becomes more likely.
Right. I want to touch on that point of causation more. So you mentioned that your study was broken up into 3 groups.
That is correct.
With the group that was most exposed to Drufo consisting of farm laborers and gardeners, right?
Mostly, yes.
Right. Now, just to clarify, those farm laborers were exposed to other chemicals, weren't they?
I mean, everyone on Earth is exposed to chemicals. So yes, I suppose they were exposed to chemicals just like every person is exposed to chemicals every day.
Well, farm laborers, they typically work with multiple fertilizers, right?
Typically, yes.
They work with multiple different products.
Usually.
So those farm laborers didn't use only products containing Drufo, right?
It would depend on each farm laborer, but I would say for the most part, yes, that several of them did use products that did not contain Drufo as well.
Right. So because those farm laborers were exposed to products that weren't Drufo, you weren't able to limit the one factor you wanted to test.
Well, I would say that when you look at groups so big that differences like that start to even out across the group, so it becomes less important.
Those farm laborers being exposed to multiple other products than Drufo, they evened out?
Yes, as I was saying, of course, if you looked at this on an individual basis, yes, things like you were saying about other products they use would make a big difference in what could have caused their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or other cancers like it. But when you look at such big groups like that, it's much easier to see the general trends.
Well, Dr. Rogers, you didn't separate the farm laborers who only use Drufo
from the farm laborers who used Drufo and other products, did you?
If I were to do that, that would have made the sample size incredibly small and it would have been an inaccurate study. So no, I did not.
Dr. Rogers, I wasn't asking why you didn't limit the factor you wanted to test, but you didn't separate the farm laborers who only use Drufo from the farm laborers who use Drufo and other products, correct?
Asked and answered.
I may respond, Your Honor.
It looks like the judge is frozen. Let's give him a second to unfreeze. Looks like we may have lost him. Please pause all times.
Monitor, are we still connected?
We are still connected. We just tried to call our judge and he has not answered his phone. We've also tried to re-email, but we have not gotten a response. Are any of my scoring panelists comfortable judging?
If necessary. Liz, Angelina, would you like to take on that role?
Honestly, I do not feel prepared to judge.
I've only judged once.
You're one ahead of me then, Angelina.
Yeah, but I've never been a judge, and I thought that one of the rules was that you had to actually be a judge to be a judge.
Let's hold for 1 second. It sounds like we are talking to him now. Okay, it sounds like if William, if you are willing to judge until we can get him back in here, he is close, but we're not quite there yet. Otherwise, we will wait until he can return. This is all about your comfortability, William.
Well, if that's the only consideration, I'm comfortable, but.
All right, well then let's move forward until we can welcome him back in.
Okay.
Your Honor, I believe I was just finishing my cross. I had a couple more questions. Is it all right if we start from or the time left off with that cross?
Yes, I believe that would be fine. Thank you.
So, Dr. Rogers, in that middle group of your study, those who were occasionally exposed, you didn't separate those who only used Drufo from those who used Drufo and other products, did you?
No, I did not.
And in that final group who were most highly exposed to Drufo, you didn't separate those who only used Drufo from those who used Drufo and other products, did you?
No, I was just looking at the chemical Drufo specifically. And as we talked about earlier, most of these people were using other products. So if I did try and separate them like that, it would have just resulted in a very small sample size.
So that's a yes to my question. You didn't make separate groups, did you?
No, I didn't make separate groups.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Rogers, can you please outline why the methodology that you used in the study is effective?
Sure. So what was so effective about this study was that I looked at large groups of people to see how these numbers averaged out. As I talked about before, on an individual basis, it's true that use of other products could have affected these things. When we look at such large groups, the overall results just tend to average out.
Can you please elaborate on how correlation and causation work in the scientific field?
Yes, so it is true that correlation cannot prove causation. However, when we see a correlation like we did in today's study of 10 times as likely, causation at that point is more probable than not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Recross?
Yes, Your Honor, very briefly.
Please.
Dr. Rogers, you mentioned that your sample sizes were extremely large, and that's why you couldn't isolate your causal factor. Isn't that right?
This is outside the scope of redirect.
Your Honor, this goes direct.
I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
Dr. Rogers, you said that. Yes, of course.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Of course I can. You said that your sample size was so large that you couldn't separate the one factor you were trying to research through your study, right?
What I said was that if I had separated it like that, it would have been too small. So yes, I guess you could say that the sample size as it was now was fairly large.
You can't give us a specific number or even range of participants in the study, can you?
No, that information is not in my affidavit. I can reasonably extrapolate as to the sample size if you would like me to.
Right, so just to clarify, it is not within your affidavit that your research sample size was extremely large, is it?
No, it is not specifically stated in there. However, because we know that it wasn't limited to just the people using Drufo, it's fair to assume that the range of people that could have been used is much greater.
So just to clarify, that's a no.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not necessarily that the sample size was so ginormous. It's just that if I had limited it to the people using Drufo, it would have been much smaller. So I'm not trying to say that the sample size was huge, but rather it would have been smaller had we limited it to just the people who use Drufo.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. I asked the witness if they stated that their sample size was large within their statement. It was yes or no answer. I did not get a clear yes or no back.
Response?
Your Honor, this line of reasoning is unfair extrapolation, and my witness has answered to the best of his ability.
I may respond, Your Honor.
Please.
Your Honor, I was asking the witness if something they stated during redirect was within their statement and clarifying for the jury that it is in fact not. This is the farthest thing from extrapolation you can get. I'm trying to clarify what is within the witness's own affidavit for the jury.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Please go ahead.
Dr. Rogers, can I please just get a clear yes or no? Nowhere in your study did you state that the sample size was extremely large, correct?
No, I did not state that.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
The witness is excused. Plaintiff's counsel, anything further?
At this time, the plaintiff rests, Your Honor.
All right, is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
apologize, Your Honor. I seem to be having technical difficulties.
It seems to be our day for it.
It does. Can everyone see me now?
Yes.
Thanks.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Blake Doncourt.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ms. Doncourt.
Well, I am a heli-skiing enthusiast. I scuba dive occasionally, and I'm also the CEO of my company, Flush Fertilizer.
Sorry, was there an objection?
Yes, to relevance for the first part of the response specifically, not the last part.
Response?
Your Honor, we're just introducing the witness for the jury, laying a little bit of background and foundation.
I'll sustain the objection. Please proceed.
So, Ms. Doncourt, what do you do for a living?
I am the CEO of Flush Fertilizer.
How long have you worked at Lush for?
Oh gosh, it's been about 20 years. I built Lush from the ground up, right around the time I started to get into heli-skiing.
As the CEO, what is your main role with the company?
I'm involved in many different parts of my company. I oversee a little bit of product development. I can do financial analyses, things like that.
As a company, what exactly does Lush do?
We make fertilizer. We want everyone to have the green grass without ever harming the environment.
Well, how are you able to do this?
We do this through a chemical called Drufo.
What is Drufo, Ms. Doncourt?
Drufo is a bonding agent. It's like when you put on a helmet to go skiing and the buckles click the sides together. That's what Drufo does with our product and grass.
Did your company ever conduct any studies into Drufo?
Yes, we did.
Do you know the results of these studies?
To my knowledge, all of the studies showed that Drufo is safe.
Now, Ms. Durst, are you aware, or Ms. Doncourt, excuse me, are you aware of Casey Rogers' study?
Not until very recently. I believe it was brought up when this whole litigation started. I was on a heli-skiing trip in the Alps during the time.
And additionally, Ms. Doncourt, do you know who Carson Durst is?
I do, yes.
Who?
Miss Durst used to be formerly employed at my company.
What happened?
Unfortunately, we did have to fire Carson due to poor performance reviews.
And did you hear Ms. Durst talk earlier about an email?
Yes, I did. That email is fake.
Well, Ms. Doncourt, what makes you say the email is fake?
Well, when this whole mess started, we turned over our email servers to the plaintiff's lawyers, and they searched through those servers. Never once did they find that email.
So had you ever seen that document before?
It's totally fake.
We've also heard a lot today about baking. What is baking?
Baking is a manufacturing process. You apply a lot of heat to a product. It's very energy intensive.
Do you bake your product, Ms. Doncourt?
No, we do not. Drufo is safe already.
Why exactly didn't you bake it?
Well, baking Drufo would be like, oh, I don't know, wearing 2 helmets while you go heli-skiing. You don't need 2 helmets, and we don't need to bake Drufo because you're already safe with 1 helmet.
I'm sorry. Was there an objection?
Yes, relevance. I would simply ask that this witness refrain from bringing in knowledge that isn't relevant, such as skiing.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Please.
The witness is simply giving a comparison or an analogy for the jury just to put it in clear terms.
Going to overrule the objection. Please proceed.
So, Ms. Doncourt, why didn't you bake your product?
Well, like I was saying, it was like wearing 2 helmets while heliskiing. 2 helmets isn't needed. You're safe with just 1 helmet. And Drufo already had 1 helmet on it without baking it.
Would it have cost you any money to bake it?
Oh, absolutely. Everything costs money nowadays.
Was this a major factor in your decision not to bake your product?
It was something we considered, but not a major factor.
Now, finally, Ms. Doncourt, you've stated that you didn't bake Drufo because it was safe. Why do you say that your product was safe?
Like I said, as CEO, I see research and whatnot, and all of the studies that I saw showed that Drufo was already safe without baking.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, you are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Yes, I am.
And as we've established, one of the key ingredients in Lush Fertilizer is Drufo.
That's correct, yes.
Now, notwithstanding the validity of these studies, there are numerous studies that
Objection, I retract my objection. My apologies, Your Honor.
Notwithstanding the validity of these studies, aren't there numerous studies depicting Drufo as carcinogenic?
All the studies that I saw showed Drufo was safe.
Aren't there studies that exist depicting Drufo as carcinogenic?
Within Lush, what I saw was Drufo was safe. That's as far as my knowledge is.
You are aware of the existence, as mentioned earlier in this trial, of other studies showing Drufo as carcinogenic.
Of studies like Casey Rogers' study?
Yes, that is one example. So you're aware of this, correct?
Yes, but not until recently.
Right. But notwithstanding these concerns, you put Drufo on the market.
Yes, because it was safe.
Right. Yet, on the CEO, it falls on you to ensure that every risk in your company is explored. Isn't that correct?
It does, yes.
And I assume that you are familiar with the email or Exhibit 4?
And that email is fake.
Right. Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been previously marked and entered as Exhibit 4?
Yes, please.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, is there anything on this email to suggest that it is fake?
That email was never found in our email servers, so
Yet,
it's fake.
My apologies. Yet, is there anything on this email to suggest that it is manufactured?
The fact that it doesn't show up in our email servers shows that it is fake.
That is not what I am asking. Is there anything on this email that you can see in this exhibit right now that proves that it is manufactured?
Well, within the exhibit, it looks like it could have been typed on a document. I don't know. To me, it seems fake. It is fake.
Of course, yet we don't know that you didn't just delete this, do we?
Like I said, our emails were searched through. It doesn't exist on our servers.
Moving on, isn't it also correct that you did not include a warning about carcinogenic properties on the packaging of your fertilizer?
That would be correct.
And as we mentioned the baking process, isn't it true that baking completely eliminates carcinogenic risk?
If there was a significant risk, yes, it would have.
Right. But you didn't properly treat the fertilizer, as you said, by baking it.
Drufo was safe without baking.
Right. And you also said that cost was something you considered along with this?
It was, yes. I'm CEO. I do have a company to maintain, a company that, makes money.
Of course, yet you said that this wasn't a major consideration?
It was a consideration, but not major.
Yet, did you not create an entire amortization table to visualize the predicted savings?
That's part of my job as CEO.
Right. And as part of this amortization table, would you say that you saved over $100,000?
I believe so, yes.
Would you say that you even saved over $1 million?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
Response?
Your Honor, I am simply asking about how much was potentially saved by baking, which is something that Ms. Doncourt, as the CEO, would know.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Please.
Although Ms. Doncourt would have knowledge of this, this information is contained in the contents of an exhibit. This exhibit has to be entered in order for Ms. Doncourt to be questioned specifically about the contents of it, which she is.
Going to overrule the objection. Please proceed.
Would you estimate that you saved over $1 million, Ms. Doncourt?
So, I did this table quite some time ago, so you'll forgive me if I don't remember it exactly.
Of course. Well, by not baking the fertilizer, isn't it true that you specifically saved $2,615,553?
I suppose so. Again, this table was created way back when.
Right. So you knew that this would completely eliminate the risk, and yet you still didn't bake the fertilizer.
There was no significant risk for it to eliminate. Drufo was safe.
Right. Ms. Doncourt, moving on. As a CEO, isn't it important to make rational decisions for your company?
Yes, it is.
And wouldn't you agree that major life events can impact rational decision-making?
I don't know. I suppose sometimes, but I'd like to think I can keep a pretty clear head when making decisions about my company and not letting my personal life be involved.
Sure. Speaking of your personal life, isn't it true that you just recently got out of divorce proceedings?
I did. It's really unfortunate, yeah.
Yes. So this would impact your emotional stability and rationality.
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Response?
Your Honor, this witness just testified that it is possible that major life events can impact rational decision-making. This is simply a follow-up question to that based on her own logical conclusion.
Response, Your Honor.
Briefly.
I believe opposing counsel said something along the lines of this would directly impact Ms. Doncourt's decisions and her emotional state. That is counsel testifying.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Moving on. Would this also impact how you manage your This impacted how you managed your finances for your company, didn't it?
Where's this costly?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. May I get a time check?
20 minutes and 19 seconds.
Now, Ms. Doncourt, you were asked on cross-examination about your divorce. What relevance does this have here today?
It really doesn't have much. I think, that's my personal life, and we're here today to talk about my company. Divorce is still definitely a little touchy for me.
Of course, Ms. Doncourt. Would you ever let your personal financial situation affect your decisions as the CEO?
No, I really do my best to keep my company and my personal life separate.
You were also asked on cross-examination about a document that Carson Durst says is an email. Is this email real?
No, it's fake.
What makes you say that it's fake?
Well, like I said, the plaintiff lawyers had access to our email system, and this email was never found there. It's simply a fake.
Ms. Doncourt, you were also asked about baking. Why didn't you bake your fertilizer?
Drufo was already safe.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay. Recross,
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
please.
Ms. Doncourt, isn't it true that baking completely eliminates 100% any risk? Yes or no?
If there was a risk, it would eliminate it.
Right. And furthermore, isn't it true that your monetary decisions for Lush just so happen to line up with your monetary decisions relating to your divorce?
My monetary decisions for Lush are decisions I make for my company.
Of course. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Vince, have any additional witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand. Permission to proceed, Your Honor?
One moment, let's check. Monitor, did we get Brian back?
Yes.
Would he like to resume?
Yes, let's give him 1 minute to settle back in, make sure everything's working correctly.
I'm back.
Welcome. We have continued, but we missed you greatly. William was steadfast in your position. But welcome back. We will continue moving on. We are still moving at a great pace, guys. Everyone is doing fantastic.
Thank you all. And William, thank you so much. There's a Comcast truck outside my building. That might be some clue.
Might be. I believe we did the Blake Goncourt, Don Court testimony, and we're ready for the second witness.
Please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Skylar Weirds.
Ms. Weers, what do you do for a living?
Well, I like to call it many things, truth-seeking, truth-finding, but the layman term might be investigative journalism.
Who do you write for?
I write for Rationalist magazine.
When writing for the Rationalist magazine, what is your typical process like?
Well, normally when I'm looking at a topic, I start at the broadest place possible. But then I look at what things I think are important or relevant or interesting, and I zoom in on those.
Well, what have you been tasked with writing about as of lately?
For the past year, I've been working on a series of articles about modern agritech.
Did you follow that same process of getting a broad base of knowledge and then zeroing in on something with your research in modern agritech?
Yeah, what I did with modern agritech was I found the most important studies, researchers, and after that I followed various rabbit holes, looked at studies referenced by other studies. I even tracked down information from the government at one point. I believe it was the Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Association of the State Departments of Agriculture.
How long did you spend researching just modern agritech?
Well, it's been about a year, but this hasn't been a normal 9 to 5 for me. It's been closer to a 12 to 12. I've been burning the midnight oils sometimes, and sometimes I don't sleep for days on end.
All right, Dr. Rogers. My apologies, Ms. Spears. Your Honor, at this point in time, the defense moves to enter Skylar Weers as an expert in modern agritech.
Response from the plaintiff side,
What year, Your Honor?
please.
Mrs. Weers, you didn't get any education in agritech,
Well, I've done plenty of research on it.
but you didn't get any like formal education, like college or like a degree.
I don't believe that there are any college degrees in modern agritech, but any formal education, no.
And you testified that you've done a year of research for this article, correct?
Yes.
And in that year, you only spent a portion of it doing research for Drufo?
Well, Drufo has been a large chunk of that year, but it did take me a bit of time to get to it.
Now, as for your research on Drufo, you didn't do any studies on the side effects of Drufo yourself, correct?
I don't do studies myself. I take the studies that other people have done and put them together.
And so you use other people's research to create your articles?
Yeah, I find the most reliable sources that I can and put it all together to help people understand.
And did you give a list of any of these referenced articles here today?
I didn't consider that necessary, but I would be happy to give a list. I've tracked down information from various companies, as well as, well, all over the place, really.
And moving on, have you ever worked at a farm?
I have a grass allergy, so unfortunately I cannot.
Have you ever worked for an agricultural company?
You know, I think that if I had, that would make me a more biased journalist, so no.
And lastly, have you ever worked with hands-on real product?
Again, I don't think that journalists need to be involved in the things that they study. Many political journalists aren't politicians themselves, so no.
Your Honor, at this time, as the plaintiff, we object to Skylar Weirs being entered as an expert in modern agritech because under Rule 702, a witness is only qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, expertise, training, and education, and Skylar has not yet demonstrated this.
Well, as the parties know, this is subject to a pretrial motion in limine, and the ruling was that based upon a showing under 702, that the witness had any one of the 5 factors of 702. And I find that this witness has knowledge, skills, and education in the area, and I'm going to allow the testimony.
Ms. Weirs, can you tell us what is modern agritech?
What isn't modern agritech? The Shakespearean drama, the passions, the romance. Well, if I have to give a dictionary definition, it's the tools and solution that farmers use to make their process more efficient in the modern day.
Well, through your research in modern agritech, did you recognize any patterns within the industry?
Yes. If I may give an analogy to help the jury understand, modern agritech reminds me quite a bit of the myth of Saturn devouring his children, but Jupiter, the mightiest of his children, defeats his father.
What is your objection?
Relevance, Your Honor.
Well, I'm not sure where the testimony is going. Let's hear what it is, and then we'll make a determination on relevancy. All I've heard now is an introduction. Please proceed, doctor. Or excuse me, not a doctor, but please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Like I was saying, Zeus, the mightiest of, or Jupiter, the mightiest of Saturn's children, defeats his father. And this is the dynamic between the old guard and the new guard in the modern agritech industry.
What is the old guard and the new guard?
Excuse me, I'm going to allow the testimony. There was an objection. You laid some additional foundation. I don't think this is the analogy. I think the analogy is appropriate. Please proceed.
My apologies, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, can you tell us what is the new guard and the old guard?
Well, the old guard are essentially companies that have been around since the very beginning of agritech. They've got a lot of resources, they've got a lot of customers, they've got a lot of money. The new guard, on the other hand, are companies that are just starting to get into the industry. I often see that they're targeted by the old guard.
Well, do you have any examples you found through your research of the old guard targeting the new guard that can kind of provide some context for us here today?
Yes. One example I can think of right away is something that happened with Monsanto a few years ago.
Who's Monsanto?
Monsanto is just a general chemical company.
I'm sorry, you were garbled when you came out. Your objection is what?
I'm sorry, the objection was to relevance, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it. Again, I need to hear the testimony in context to determine the relevancy. If it's not appropriate, I can move to strike it before the jury, but let the witness testify and then we'll make our determination. Go ahead. Ms. Schuyler, please proceed.
Monsanto is just a general chemical company, but they've dipped their toes into modern agritech a few times.
And so how does this situation with Monsanto demonstrate what you were talking about earlier with the old guard targeting the new guard?
Well, I saw this dynamic with Monsanto because what they did was they introduced a new maize herbicide. That sounds mundane, but let me tell you, from what I've seen about this maize herbicide, it could have changed the world. If it had succeeded, we might all be eating corn for every meal of the day to this day. But unfortunately, didn't work out.
Why?
Well, the old guard saw Monsanto's product and they realized they were going to lose money. So they waged a huge PR campaign against this product. And unfortunately, their false claims turned the public's opinion around.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Your Honor, we're going to shift into a different line of questioning right now. None of that testimony was stricken from the record, correct?
None of it is stricken from the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Weirs, Do you think this same dynamic between the old guard and the new guard is happening with Lush fertilizer today?
Oh, of course.
Why?
Well, I think we've all seen today that Lush has introduced a perfectly fine product, but faulty evidence has been introduced against it to make them look bad.
So what does Lush and Drufo mean for the old guard?
The old guard is seeing Lush's new product, and they know they are going to lose money. So they're trying their best to get it off the market.
Do you have any evidence to back this point up?
I think that this very court case is evidence in and of itself. Again, all the evidence that we've seen introduced has been faulty or misleading. And overall, Lush has introduced a perfectly fine product.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
And just to check, can you hear me okay?
On occasion, you garble, but it clears up as you speak. So go ahead.
Okay, just like if you can't hear me for a couple of seconds, just speak out.
Ms. Schuyler, if you can't hear, you the same. Have you been able to hear her okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, please. I'll interrupt you if I can't, but so far it's been okay.
Okay. To start out, is it true that you are an investigative journalist?
That is my passion and my job.
And to be specific, a freelance investigative journalist.
You know, those big corporate newspapers like CNN and Fox News, I couldn't work for them. I value the truth a lot, and I thought independent journalism
Ms.
was
Schuyler,
the best way to go.
I'm going to caution you, as I've done previous witnesses. This court is under a strict time frame. I'd like you to answer the question without editorializing about programs that are on TV and whether you like them or not. Answer the question in a cogent, discreet manner. And if you have something you need to add, you can do it on redirect. Please
Yes, sir.
continue with your cross.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Ms. Weirs?
I don't think that'll be necessary, counsel.
Okay. I didn't get an answer, so I'm just going to quickly be specific. Oh, sorry, Your Honor.
Oh, go ahead. I thought the comment was appropriate. Go ahead.
Okay. And to be specific, you're a freelance investigative journalist.
A very proud one, yes.
And so you get paid to write articles.
Well, you're being paid too, counsel. It's our jobs.
You write for the Rationalist magazine.
Yep.
You also authored an article that was published in the Rationalist magazine.
I've authored many articles for Rationalist.
But to be more specific, this article in question questioned the narrative between the causal link between Drufo and cancer, correct?
Yes.
And you spent about a year reading for this, researching for this article, excuse me.
Yes, a full year and many late nights.
And in your research, you researched the company Lush Fertilizer.
Of course.
Also, in your research, you found that synthetic nitrogen is one of the key ingredients in Lush Fertilizer.
That's true.
Along with your other research, you found that nitrogen has been linked to the various types of diseases and cancers, correct?
Well, sure, but it's a common product in many pesticides.
Also, in your witness statement, you classified Drufo as an effective pesticide.
I think it's a good product, yeah.
And pesticides are poisons, as you say in your witness statement.
Sure, but you know, if you're using it rationally, not drinking it, you should be fine.
And from your research, you say that Lush Fertilizer's products are safe, if not more safe than their competitors' products, correct?
That's all the information I've seen.
Now, moving on to a different line of questioning, you admit to being a bit of a gambler.
I am known to gamble on Dungeons and Dragons tournaments, yes.
And a few years back at a March Madness event, you were put in a hole that you are yet to have climbed out of.
I've been working on that for a few years, yeah.
And your parents were helping you out of this hole financially?
Yeah.
Until your father cut you off?
He did that to pay for Dakota's medical bills, and I think that's justified.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Firstly, Ms. Weirs, you were during cross-examination, you talked about using Drufo or fertilizer in general rationally and how it leads to someone being safe. Could you clarify what you meant by using rationally?
Yeah, of course, any chemical product like Drufo is going to be dangerous in certain ways, but if you're using it rationally, not drinking it, not bathing in it, you should be fine.
Lastly, Ms. Weirs, do you have any financial incentive in testifying today?
No, of course not. My work has always been all about the truth. In fact, I think some of my father's French has rubbed off on me. One of my favorite expressions is la vérité triomphe de tout, meaning the truth triumphs over all.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Any requests?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
You're excused and thank you for your testimony. Defense, are you prepared to call your next witness?
Your Honor, could I have a brief moment? I need to handle a technical difficulty really fast.
That's fine. I understand that.
All right, Your Honor, can you see and hear me clearly?
I can.
Perfect. At this time, the defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Please proceed.
Could you please introduce yourself for the jury?
My name is Dr. Devin Williams.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Williams?
I am a research toxicologist at Lush's Labs.
And why are you here testifying today?
I'm here today to show that using Drufo leads to no increased risk in developing cancers.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience. Do you have any education?
Of course, I have my master's all the way through my PhD.
Dr. Williams, what did you receive a PhD in?
I received my PhD in research toxicology.
Do you have certifications for your position?
I do. I have certifications in clinical and forensic toxicology.
As well, Dr. Williams, how long have you been working in your field?
Let's see now. I got my PhD back in 2003, so almost 20 years now.
And in those 20 years of experience, have you worked other places than Lush Fertilizer?
I have. I took a post-PhD program, then I worked out of a post-grad program after that, and then eventually I joined Lush.
How long have you now been with Lush Fertilizer?
I've been with Lush for 10 years, and 7 of those years I've led the research and toxicology labs.
Dr. Williams, before we get any further, could you explain to us what even is a research toxicologist?
That's a great question. Research toxicologist essentially works to understand how chemicals within an environment negatively impact that environment, and then we research on how to negate those effects.
Are you familiar with the chemical Drufo?
I am, yes. I've worked with it closely.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to tender Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of research toxicology.
Fort Ire, or any
There's no
objection?
objection, Your Honor.
Pardon?
Sorry, there's no objection, Your Honor, to Dr. Williams being admitted as a research toxicologist.
Okay, doctor, you're admitted as an expert witness this trial as an expert in research toxicology.
Now, Dr. Williams, what's your main goal as a research toxicologist at Lush Fertilizer?
Well, my main goal at Lush is to create a safer fertilizer.
Why is it important to create a safer fertilizer?
Older fertilizers, old guard fertilizers, leave excess nitrogen in the environment through a process known as eutrophication. This then goes on to harm bodies of water, plant life, and it's really bad for the environment.
If it's so bad for the environment, what do you as a scientist do to try and stop that?
Here at Lush, we've added a revolutionary product known as Drufo.
Could you explain what is Drufo?
Sure thing. Drufo is a bonding agent, which essentially means that less fertilizer is used and it's more effective. This reduces the nitrogen impact through eutrophication, and it makes the environment, the world, a whole bunch safer.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I'm going to allow it.
Dr. Williams, does Lush Fertilizer typically run studies on products that they create?
Absolutely.
What's the goal of the studies that Lush Fertilizer conducts?
Well, these studies are conducted to see if Drufo might have any adverse effects.
Did you run studies specifically on the fertilizer that contained Drufo?
We did, yes.
What was the outcome of those safety studies?
Those studies showed that using Drufo leads to no increased risk in developing cancers such as non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Dr. Williams, after getting those results, were you confident in the safety of your product?
I was extremely confident, yes.
Are you also familiar with Dr. Casey Rogers?
I am, yes.
Are you familiar with the study that Dr. Rogers ran on Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
I am.
What was your general opinion about it?
My general opinion is that the results of that study are invalid for three major reasons. The study has three fatal flaws.
You say there are three fatal flaws. Let's talk a little bit about those. What was the first fatal flaw in Dr. Rogers' study?
The first fatal flaw I've noticed in Dr. Rogers' study is it's never been repeated.
Why is it important to repeat a study?
If we look at any diagram of the scientific method in a high school, you'll see the last step is always to repeat the process. Repeating the process of an experiment either supports the conclusion found in the first experiment or it disproves it. This didn't happen in that study, so there's no way of knowing if the conclusions of Dr. Rogers' study are accurate at all.
Dr. Williams, just to clarify, what exactly does it mean for the results of the study that it wasn't replicated?
Never being repeated, the results of the study cannot be verified and they're thus invalid.
All right, Dr. Williams, what was the second fatal flaw you noticed?
The second fatal flaw I've noticed with Dr. Rogers' study is it's never been peer reviewed.
What do you mean by that?
In the academic community, the process of peer reviewing allows other certified members of the scientific academic community to look over an experiment and point out any flaws with it. This didn't happen in Dr. Rogers' study, and these flaws made it through to the final conclusion.
And lastly, what was the third fatal flaw you noticed?
The third and most important flaw I found with Dr. Rogers' study is its extremely flawed methodology.
What do you mean by a flawed methodology?
In a study, you're only supposed to test one changing variable. Dr. Rogers took people who garden, people who don't garden, and then farm laborers. That's three variables right there. And on top of those three variables, Dr. Rogers looked into how much Drufo was being used. That's a lot more than three changing variables.
Why is it significant that more than one variable was changed?
When more than one variable is changed, there's no way of pinpointing what the problem is and if that problem is even Drufo.
So based on that fatal flaw, how did that affect the study?
Well, based on that fatal flaw and the other two we've seen, the results of the study cannot be considered valid within the scientific community.
So Dr. Williams, based on everything you've just told us and everything you know, what was your conclusion about Drufo?
Based on everything I know and everything I've told you, my conclusion is that using Drufo leads to no increased risk of developing cancers.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Williams, you've been employed at Lush for over a decade,
That's correct.
and so your financial future rests on the outcome of this case.
I would hardly say my financial future. Sure, I have some small financial bias, but not my financial future.
So you do have a financial bias in this case.
I have a small financial bias, yes.
Thank you. Now, moving on to your work at at Lush, you worked primarily with Drufo.
I worked with the labs and I worked closely with Drufo.
You worked with Drufo all 10 years of your employment.
I did, yes.
And as part of your 10 years working with Drufo, Don Court asked you to keep it cost effective. Is that correct?
Sure, you can't make a fertilizer that costs $1 million, but my main goal was to keep it safe.
Thank you. Moving on to Drufo and its correlation to the EU. It is banned in the EU, correct?
It's banned in the EU, but not for cancerous reasons.
But again, Dr. Williams, it is banned in the EU.
That's correct.
So the outcome of this case could affect the resubmission process to being sold in the EU.
It would create some bureaucratic roadblocks, but we're currently working on a study that we hope to submit to the EU that will reverse their findings.
Dr. Williams, I did not ask about your current resubmission process. I asked if the outcome of this case would affect how the resubmission process to the EU.
Sure, it would affect it.
Thank you. Now moving on to your experience with Dr. Rogers' study. You did research and analyze the study.
I did, yes.
But you disagreed with its findings?
I did. I found 3 major flaws with it.
However, Dr. Rogers' study is published, correct?
It's published, but I've seen an exceptionally flawed methodology, no repetition, and no peer review. All things done within the academic community.
I didn't ask about your opinions on the flaws that you perceive of this study, but published studies typically have a scientific merit. Isn't that true?
Most do, and I don't see much in Dr. Rogers' case.
But you didn't perform your own study?
We've performed extensive studies at Lush.
You specifically have not done a study to prove that there is not a carcinogenic link between Drufo and Drufo.
I've done many at Lush.
Have you brought any of these to court today?
Unfortunately, I can't due to trade secrets.
You cannot provide to the court examples of carcinogenic effects of Drufo because of trade secrets.
Unfortunately, I can't bring the reports that show Drufo isn't carcinogenic.
So if you can provide no examples and because of trade secrets, how are we to assume that your testimony is not being limited due to these trade secrets that you are keeping?
I'm here to prove that Drufo doesn't cause any adverse health effects. I want to make the world a safer place.
But you have admitted here yourself that you are limited by trade secrets of the company.
The only thing limiting me there is I can't bring the reports. I can talk about them, sure.
So you have no reports, you're limited by your trade secrets.
I have no paper copies I can show the jury, unfortunately.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect necessary, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Appreciate your testimony. You're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense, did that conclude your case?
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, the defense rests.
Okay. Are there any motions pending before the court before we do closing arguments?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then let's do closing arguments, and plaintiff, time that you did not use in your closing will be reserved for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. Sorry. Can you hear me right? Okay.
I hear you fine now. Thank you.
May I begin?
Yes, you may.
May it please the court, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, Dakota Weirs demonstrated that at just 14, he began working for a landscape company, Haven Landscaping, a locally owned business that used Lush Fertilizers products. But what Dakota didn't know was that while he was lining the pots, Lush had been lining their pockets. Dakota thrived off of helping others, was an active member of his community, contributing to his National Honor Society, was the president of the student body government, and even volunteered at his local homeless shelter when he could. Also, he was a talented piano player, and in fact, he had received a scholarship to the prestigious Juilliard School of Arts and Music to continue his music career. But all of that was torn away from him when he developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma as a result of Lush Fertilizers' negligence. Today, we represent Dakota Weirs and have proved by a preponderance of evidence that Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma was more likely than not a result of Lush Fertilizers' neglect to recall products with the compound called Drufo. As the plaintiff, we brought forth 3 witnesses. First, Dakota Weirs, the plaintiff and the victim of Lush Fertilizer who developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma after repeated use of Lush Fertilizer's products. He explained how he was exposed to a fertilizer that had no warning label while he was lining the pots, despite the company being banned in Europe for the product's use of the compound known as Drufo. Moreover, the second witness, Carson Durst, a previous employee of Lush Fertilizer who was the product development engineer. In detail, Durst explained how the studies performed by scientific professionals had been ignored by company heads, despite showing Drufo's carcinogenic nature. Durst testified that the research concluded that long-term exposure at early ages increases the carcinogenic nature, which was supported by Dakota Weirs' horrible development of cancer. And lastly, Durst testified that Lush failed to create safer products despite the company being told that baking Drufo would eliminate the carcinogenic risk, ultimately choosing to line their pockets rather than help the people. And finally, from the plaintiff, you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, a professor in horticultural and entomology department at the University of California, Berkeley. He testified to the carcinogenic nature of Drufo. He also testified that after years of research and the evidence illustrates an increase in critical health conditions and diagnoses among people who are exposed to Drufo. Dr. Rogers also gave us the burden of proof in today's case because he had the only testimony as to the more likely or not that Drufo causes cancer. The defense and all their witnesses were either had motive or were biased. And then the defense brought forth their 3 witnesses. First, CEO of Lush Fertilizer, Blake Doncourt, who showed that he cares for his company more than a child's life. He testified that the company had known that baking the Drufo would eliminate the drug's carcinogenic effects. Yet after learning this information and calculating, Doncourt testified that it was too expensive. In the end, Doncourt admitted that for Lush, there was a greater importance in the company lining their pockets than to produce better goods to line the pots. Second, the defense brought forth Dakota Weirs' twin, Skylar Weirs, a phony news writer with a history of questionable articles. The defense claimed that Skylar is an expert in modern agritech, but do not be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. Skylar is just a 20-year-old with rudimentary writing experience about UFOs, flat earth theory, and anti-vax rhetoric. Skylar has no college degree and a history of gambling issues. Skylar claimed that the research shows Drufo has no correlation to cancer. But remember, Skylar is not a doctor, just an inexperienced writer. And lastly, the defense brought forth the biased Dr. Devin Williams, the lead toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer, as well as the chair of the company's ethics committee. Dr. Williams claimed that Drufo has no significant probability of causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma. But it is important to remember that Dr. Williams is a toxicologist hired by the company Lush and ultimately has a bias towards the benefit of the company, therefore caring more about lining Lush's pockets. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense stated that Dakota Weirs was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Was due to a lack of responsibility, but as the plaintiff, we have proved by a preponderance of evidence that it is more likely than not that Dakota Weirs developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma as a result of Lush Fertilizer's neglect. The defense had tons of bias and motives, which ultimately led to the destruction that Drufo caused in Dakota Weirs' life. And don't forget that Dakota lined the pots so that Lush could line their pockets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Defense closing?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, can the court see and hear me all right?
We can.
Someone to blame. Members of the jury, we aren't here today to try and convince you that what happened to Dakota Weirs isn't a tragedy. Instead, we're here to ask you, is Lush Fertilizer's fault? Now, Ms. Carney, she just got up here and told you that Lush Fertilizer was lining their pockets. This isn't a story about corporate greed. In the end, it's a story about a family, a desperate family trying to find someone to blame. And the plaintiff sued Lush Fertilizer, and they took on a heavy burden. Today, they had to show that Lush is liable through a preponderance of the evidence. They had to prove that Lush knew their product was dangerous and sold it anyways, and that Drufo, not something else, is what caused Dakota Weirs to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, at the beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel, Lily Radowski, asked you 3 questions to keep in mind today. Let's revisit those now. Firstly, can we trust Dr. Casey Rogers' study? Today, you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, who showed you a study the plaintiff wants you to believe shows a clear connection between Drufo and cancer. But as you've heard today, the study, it's fatally flawed. Dr. Williams just got up to the stand and told you that it wasn't peer-reviewed and it wasn't replicated, both things done within the academic community to ensure that the results of a study are reliable. But what's more, as you heard from Dr. Rogers himself today, the fundamental design of the study itself was flawed. He failed to isolate the one factor he wanted to test. Those farm laborers in the study, they were exposed to chemicals, fertilizers, and pesticides other than Drufo. Drufo could have caused the cancer, but it's just as likely that some other material that those farmers were exposed to could have caused the cancer as well. Study holds no weight. Secondly, could something else other than Drufo have caused Dakota Weirs to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? Well, you heard from Dakota Weirs himself today. Got up on the stand and told you that in his 4 years working at Havens Landscaping, day in and day out, he used a variety of different fertilizers, pesticides, and chemicals, so many that he couldn't even name them all. As a reminder, today the plaintiff had to prove to you that Drufo, not something else, is what caused Mr. Weirs to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But because of everything he was exposed to, that's just impossible to do. Lastly, we have to ask, did Dakota Weirs protect himself? At the beginning of today's trial, we showed you Exhibit 1, the label on the back of Lush Fertilizer that clearly states those who use it should wear a respirator, cover their skin. You heard from Mr. Weirs today, and he told you that he didn't wear a respirator, didn't wear pants, didn't wear long sleeves, didn't protect himself. The plaintiff wants you to believe that while Dakota Weirs was lining the pots, Lush was lining their pockets. But in reality, while Dakota Weirs was lining the pots, Lush Fertilizer failed to protect him. It failed to protect a 14-year-old boy who was working day in and day out with harmful pesticides and chemicals. He should be suing Lush Fertilizer today. He should not be, my apologies, he should be suing Havens Landscaping today, not Lush Fertilizer. plaintiff is looking for someone to blame. Members of the jury, it's clear that that fault can't be found with lush fertilizer. That's why we ask you to find them not liable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't tell, has any time been allowed for rebuttal or did it expire?
I used all my time, Your Honor.
Okay. Then I find the case submitted to the jury. Any other matters that either side would like to bring before the court before the case is submitted to the jury?
I think we're okay.
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, and then I thank all the participants who did an excellent job in this case. And once again, I apologize for my brief dropping out of the trial, but I believe I've seen enough to compliment you all on an excellent job.
Thank you, Your
Honor. We were given strict orders on time, and thanks to the participants, you did an excellent job in moving the case along. I'd like to give the scorers any chance to give feedback to the participants one by one. William, do you want to start? You have
Judge,
any?
let's make sure that all of our scoring panelists have turned in their scoring
Right.
sheet before we move into comments, please.
Okay.
I will verify that as soon as I can.
While the scores are, I guess I'll take the lead. I don't have anything to score, so I'm going to make a few comments while the scores are going. I am very amazed at how well you are prepared and how well you've done today. I do a lot of medical cases, and the one thing I would help you in the team that goes on to the national competition, which I'm sure is going to be one of the two teams here, is that jury instruction number 10 about probabilities versus possibilities. That's something that's very important, and drive that home in your closing argument. It can be the friend to both sides. And the problem is a little unclear as to whether your witnesses have opinions to a probability, but if it's not expressed in the testimony in closing arguments, that can be a very, very, very good friend. I compliment Ms. Carney in her closing argument. She followed Milo and Dr. Williams, who did an excellent job. But I would always encourage you to save time for rebuttal. Rebuttal can be one of your best friends, and they don't get a chance to respond. So save some time for rebuttal. Like I said, I do a lot of medical cases. Milo, I would like you to be my expert witness in my next real trial. You should pursue your academic scientific pursuits. You made me believe everything you said, and you did an excellent job. And the direct examination by Jordan was perfect. She lobbed the softballs in, and you knocked them out of the park. But as far as a witness, you have a great demeanor on the stand, and I can only say that I wish my real life witnesses were prepared and as good as you. And then
Thank you, Your Honor.
The last one, Ms. Radowski, opening statement. Where are you? I got to find you. If you don't become a lawyer, you need to go to Hollywood or the Broadway stage. Your opening statement, the way you paused and the way you gave the time for your statements to sink in, I thought was excellent. And I think it could probably be just as well done in Hollywood or at Broadway. But if not that, lawyers probably are not a bad third choice. But all of you did an amazingly good job. And for high school students, I would certainly equate you to some of the law students moot courts that I've judged in the past. And to think that you're only in high school, you only have a high ceiling to achieve in the future. So I compliment you all. I thought the witnesses were excellent for both sides.
All right,
William, do you have any comments?
We have received all three scoring panelists' score sheets, so the three scorers are more than welcome to share their comments, and then everyone is dismissed following that.
Okay, well, then I guess I'll jump in. I don't, there's Liz. I also want to congratulate you. I thought you all did a wonderful job. I think these are the highest scores I've given anybody in the entire competition. And frankly, I had to go back and untie it. It was really fabulous. I did think that Milo did well, but I thought the witness for Dakota, where's Dakota, did particularly well. I thought that was the best plaintiff's witness that I'd seen in the entire competition. And the examinations I thought were very good. There's, a certain amount of being thrown off your stride by the objections on the other side. And that's one of the things that I think is realistic about the competition. Constantly going to trial and finding myself thrown off by objections from the other side. Fortunately, I never had to meet Brian. But I thought everyone did a really fabulous job, and thank you all for participating. And I hope, I know you both can't go forward, so I hope one of you manages to go forward to the next stage of the competition.
Hi, I'm Liz. I work for Metro Volunteer Lawyers, but I did just want to congratulate everyone. You guys have obviously worked so hard on all of this today and leading up to it as well. Just to echo what William said about handling those objections, when someone jumps in, it can kind of throw you off your stride. You all handled it very well. And along those same lines with the technological difficulties, we've all had to do WebEx hearings for the past couple of years, and they rarely go smoothly. Just being able to roll with what happens and adapt quickly and, fire up another computer or do what you can and keeping your cool, that's a huge skill that you've been learning throughout this whole process, I'm sure.
Any comments from the third scorer?
Yes, Your Honor. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Well, I'm Angelina Page, and while I'm an attorney, I do administrative rulemaking. So this is like the most excitement I see on a regular basis every year, because if anything I do ends up in court, I probably don't have a job anymore. Anyways, though, and I'm just amazed by how well prepared you all are and actually how professional you actually do things. I mean, by this point, I know it probably may be repetitious, but the fact that you are so comfortable with making objections. I know attorneys to this day who are not comfortable with making objections, whether it just be because they're not sure what the objection is, or just because they feel like it's being rude. And you would think that by the time you get through law school, that's been beaten out of you, but it's not. And you don't want to speak up and interrupt someone, but you were really good about making sure you got that objection in before the witness said something, which is so key, especially in a real trial, because once a bell gets rang, you can't unring it. Even if you get a jury instruction that says, hey, disregard what they said, that's still going to be in the jury's mind somewhere, someday. And so you guys were really good about jumping up, getting those objections in. The other thing you were really good about is, I can tell you've all worked on your canter, to not speak too fast, to not let yourself speed up, to really keep that pace at a pace that probably in your head sounds slow, but for the rest of us, it's what draws us in. And that is so important, because it's not just a performance thing, it's actually a profession thing, to be able to speak clearly and well and really grab someone because you want them to listen. And you guys all did a wonderful job of that. And all the witnesses, again, I echo, incredible. But I have to admit, one of the most enjoyable ones today was Skylar. I got a kick out of you. You were just having fun up there. And
thank you so much.
That's what it's about. You were having fun up there, telling your story, just being very conversational. And that's an ease that does not come even with just practice. That's something that comes from inside. So kudos to you.
Thank you all for your comments. I thought Milo was so good I had to mention him, but Skylar, I have to say you're a close second. And it maybe emphasizes how you need to control witnesses, because somebody that like Ryan, Harriet could just run away with the trial if you let her go. She can take it by the horns and go all over the place if you can't control her. And I apologize for my technical glitches. I don't know what happened, but I lost my Comcast link. But the Echo Liz websites and internet hearings are extremely difficult, but it's true in real life too. You've got to be prepared for whatever comes up. My old boss used to tell me that if you don't try cases, you don't have any war stories. So a war story I have is that we were in a medical case. The defendant was on the stand. The judge became violently ill, throwing up and coughing and having convulsions. The defendant who was on the stand, the doctor who was being sued, ran to the bench, took the judge down from the chair, laid him on the floor, positioned him, cleared his airway, got out water and took his pulse and was ready to assisting the guy calling 911. That is a problem that you have to deal with in a real trial. And this is a guy who's on trial for substandard medicine. And the jury, it was all in front of the jury. Everybody saw what happened. And I won't tell you whether or not a mistrial motion was filed and whether it was granted, but you need to be prepared for whatever happens. And nothing gives the doctor defendant any more credibility than taking care of the judge. So you always have to think on your feet. You always have to be ready for whatever comes. Just because we got a minute, the other story I have is my client collapsed outside of the jury, and a 911 call, and the ambulance came in, and the fireman came in and took her out the back door in the ambulance. And the judge had to explain to the jury that she would not be attending the rest of the afternoon trial. And everybody in the courtroom knew that the ambulance came for her. So I had once when the medical assistance came for the plaintiff, one when the defendant doctor took care of the judge. So I'll tell you, if you don't think crazy things happen in trial, then you haven't tried enough cases. But you'll see that thinking on your feet is probably the best tool any one of you can have. And I think this is tremendous preparation for that type of skill and ability, whether you're a lawyer or anything else that you choose to do in your future lives. But thank you so very much. And I really enjoyed listening to you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.